Hello again, everyone. Melth here, with a side video to my usual Baldur's Gate 3 challenge run. In between Acts 1 and 2 here seems like a good time to put in some side videos. This one was requested by a viewer. And speaking of views, look at this gorgeous one over here, and at this clutter covering up a third of it over there on the left side of the screen. These 10,000 or so buffs is required over the course of Act 1. A viewer asked me to explain what those were and how I got them, so let's do a rundown of those. First off, we have Loviatar's Love over here on Ballista, my main character. If you didn't remember, you get Loviatar's Love from Asherak, the priest of Loviatar, in the Shattered Sanctum, which is the goblin-infested temple early on in Act 1. You go through his BDSM ritual of him beating you with a mace, which is not very sophisticated for impact play, but never mind that. If you make several skill checks to either ask for more, or cry out in pain loudly, you then get this buff, which lasts forever or until you get killed. Then it gets purged off you forever. Which is a bit of an issue because you only get the benefit from this if you're at low HP and therefore are at risk of being killed. So do watch out for that. It is strategically a very interesting buff, because it has quite a powerful effect, but can only be triggered if you're at low HP, obviously. Plus 2 to attack rolls, especially in the early game, is really substantial, I would say. And might be worth the risk, just guarantee important attacks hit, which can in some ways save you more HP than being at full HP in the first place, but just, kill the enemies before they get a turn and things like that. The ideal user for it is probably someone who is ranged, first of all, so they can stay safe. Number 2, has lots of temporary hit points they can generate for themselves, which do not count against the limit of being at 30% HP or less, so you can have lots of temporary hit points and still get the benefit from that. And probably has a powerful but inaccurate attack, and the best way to do that is probably to have a character with Sharpshooter. So in hindsight, probably Astarion would have been a more perfect candidate for my party to have this, but it wouldn't really have mattered anyway because I never really took much damage in this run because I'm very careful about that, so Next up we have Speak with Animals, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. You either cast a spell or drink a potion of Speak with Animals and you get it all day, and I'd recommend that. There are a lot of fun conversations with animals in this game. We can learn things or just, enjoy some interesting quirky animals that you'll meet along the way. Try it out. Next up, Elixir of Bloodlust. You get that from drinking an Elixir of Bloodlust. You guessed it right. That's probably the best elixir in the game, I would say, at least if you know what you're doing. You get an extra action with it if you kill an enemy, which is just phenomenal. Nothing in the game can really compare to getting extra actions almost every single round of every single combat. I love that. The more skillful you are, of course, the better it is. Now, it is kind of nerfed in honor difficulty a little bit for some characters, like Astarion, for example, because on other difficulty modes, if you have an extra action from either Bloodless Elixir or Haste, and you have extra attack, you can make multiple attacks with your extra actions. But in honor difficulty, it's not that way. You can only make one attack per extra action. So that is substantially less good. Still good, still well worth it, but less good. However, Ballista, my main character, is doing his damage from the Warlock cantrip Eldritch Blast by and large. And the neat thing about that is, even on honor difficulty, you can still cast all your Eldritch Blasts with your extra actions that you get from Bloodless Elixir. So, very good in Warlocks on honor difficulty, I would say. Frankly, it's good in everyone. Mage getting to cast 2 spells per round is absolutely phenomenal. The only reason I don't give it to every single character all the time is just that then you're competing with yourself for kills. You can't really give every character in the party a kill in every single round of every single combat. It's just not really viable, so it's better, I would say, to give it to your 2 main damage dealers, usually. Next up is Bliss Spores, one of my favorite Act 1 buffs. You get this from Sovereign Spa in the Micah colony. When you meet him, he'll ask you to deal with the Duergar Gek Cole down the nearby beach. And if you kill Gek Cole and report back to him, or I think if you lie to him, it's fine too, whoever talks to Spa will get the buff Bliss Spores until their next long rest, giving them plus a d6 to every single d20 roll that they make, which is amazing. Especially on your main character, who does a lot of talking and things like that. You could also make a case for giving it to an inaccurate but powerful damage dealer, like someone with Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master, but I think the main character is probably the way to go most of the time. Just a great buff, make sure you get lots of value out of it. Next up is Bual's Benediction, which is pretty obscure, I would say. Most parties will never actually get this one. It is quite fun, though. It's not, amazing, but it is fun. You get this if you go down to the Festering Cove in the Underdark, and sacrifice a party member to Bual. Every other party member in the group, for the rest of the game, gets Bual's Benediction. So for me, the people who have it in the party are, Karlach and Astarion, because I sacrificed Shadowheart, who therefore is no longer with us and doesn't have the buff, obviously. As for what it does, as it says, it gives you advantage in attack rolls against bleeding creatures. Now, There are many ways to get advantage in this game if you know what you're doing, so that's not that amazing, and bleed is not easy to inflict for long durations anyway, so that's also not that great, but it is just kind of fun to play around with, and it's decent to have another tool in your toolbox to get advantage with. So I enjoy that even though it's not great per se. Speak with Dead, kind of like Speak with Animals, I highly recommend trying it out. There's several great ways to get it early on in the game, and it lasts all day once you cast it. You can get it from either a necklace that you find in the tomb that Withers is buried in, or I have it from the Necromancy of Thay book. If you get that underneath the Alchemist's house and get the Dark Amethyst in Act 1, you can then get that spell all game long, and that's well worth doing. I also have Mage Armor, just cast on myself, that lasts all day long. Obviously that's good for the right kind of character. Next up is See Invisibility, which I got by having Volo gouge my eye out. That is well worth doing if you can stomach that cutscene. See Invisibility is moderately useful. When you want it, you really want it, I would say. And getting it on one character pretty much for free is not bad. I would say in this game it's worthwhile to cast the actual spell See Invisibility on another party member because it lasts all day, and in this game it doesn't work automatically. Enemies get a saving throw against it. So having them make 2 saving throws is a good way to make sure that it actually works more often, I would say. Rapport Spores basically do nothing. You just kind of get this for being near the Myconids down in the Underdark. Ignore it. Sylvanas' Blessing comes from the Idol of Sylvanas. You can see I actually have 3 idols here, but only the Sylvanas one does anything, so Luna and Shar are both worthless. But Sylvanas gives you this aura, and everyone in the aura gets this buff that gives them free proficiency in nature and animal handling. Are those good skills? No. Are they free skills? Yes, if you don't mind the clutter in the log as it endlessly says you've applied that buff to everyone. I'm willing to put up with that to get 2 free skills. Next up, I now have All Day Bless, which might sound amazing, and would be, and it is kind of when you get it in Act 3, but here in Act 1 is not so great because the way you get it tends not to be very useful. You get it after you talk to the Dream Visitor in the Astral Prism at the end of the Githyanki Crash. And then you get Bless all day, and that's nice, but the problem is that means you've already gone through pretty much the entire Githyanki Crash, so you probably killed most of the Githyanki. And when you try to leave this area, you were forced to rest so Voss can come talk to you, which would then purge the buff off of you. So I don't find I can get that much mileage out of it most of the time. Like, you can engineer a situation where you get some value for you, but on most runs, that All Day Bless, you won't really get any value out of. This is just the other buff I got from Bloodless Elixir, giving me temporary hit points. Then, of course, I have Concentration and Hex going on right now. Common for Warlocks, I would say. Not always the best Warlock spell, but a good one. Then there's Longstrider. Every party should always have someone who can cast Longstrider. It is free because it's a ritual. You want it on every single party member and every single creature on every single run. If you don't have it, your party is just not optimized. It's so good to have that bonus movement speed. So, lasts all day, it's free to cast, have someone in the party who can cast it on every single party member and every single creature, and you will be benefiting from it all day long. Lastly, for Ballista here, I have Shade Spell, which comes from the hat that he's wearing. You get this from Omeluum down in the Myconid colony, if you unlock him as a merchant. It's not amazing, but there's a lot of shadows in the world. This is when it activates, and in Act 1, getting a +1 to your spell save, you see, is pretty good. Later on in the game, there are more ways to boost that up, so it's not as impressive, but it's nice to have in the early game, I would say, to make your spells more consistent. Moving on to Karlach. She has False Life, that's just a basic level 1 spell she found a scroll of and cast it for 7 temporary hit points, and then she never took any damage again, so it lasted pretty much all run long. I'd recommend, casting the scrolls when you find them. You might as well, right? Then there's Elixir of Hill Giant Strength. Now, I think those are kind of overrated. They're very good in the early game, yes, but later on in the game I think they're less impressive on most characters than people tend to think. Getting 21 Strength mostly gives you more accuracy in the early game, which is nice, but later on in the game it's pretty easy to have 20 in your main attacking stat anyway, so that kind of falls off a bit. Plus other elixirs like Bloodlust or Vigilance that are probably just better become more commonly available anyway. Bull's Benediction again, Bless we've talked about. Okay, these are all things we've talked about already. Moving on to Astarion. Talked about Bloodlust. Next up we have Happy, which if you don't already know is unique to Astarion. You get it by having him bite a humanoid character and feed off of them, if they aren't Karlach or Gale, who will either burn him or poison him if he bites them. It lasts all day, and you get bite once per short rest if you mess up the first time or whatever. And it just gives him a +1 to every single d20 roll, which is incredible and just makes Astarion probably the best party member in every single party. Honestly, I don't love that he's so overpowered compared to everyone else, but that's the way it is. It's especially great if you have high damage, low accuracy attacks, like again, Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master. He's ideal for that kind of party role doing high damage. Next up we have Strider. Now, I think those are kind of overrated. They're very good in the early game, yes, but later on in the game I think they're less impressive on most characters than people tend to think. Getting 21 Strength mostly gives you more accuracy in the early game, which is nice, but there's a lot of shadows in the world. This is when it activates, and We talked about this one. Major armor we talked about before too. Next up, there's Sovereign's Protection, which you get from the Sovereign's Key, which you get from killing Sovereign's Spa in the Micah colony. And it's not important. Basically, it makes you immune to mushroom traps like Bibber Bang or whatever, but like by the time you've killed Sovereign's Spa, you've probably already dealt with most of those anyway, so usually who cares? Plus, it's not that big a deal to begin with. Then we have Report Spores, again, that doesn't matter. Talked about that one. Cat's Grace. You can either cast that as a spell enhance ability, which is pretty good because it lasts all day in this game, or he just has it from his The Graceful Cloth, which is a quite good item that you can buy nearby here from Esther, actually, the merchant that is right over there. Well worth considering, I would say. Getting +2 dexterity in the early game is not small. Getting free Cat's Grace is not small either. For the right kind of party member, it's a great item to have. Then he's cast Protection from Evil and Good on himself, which I think is an underrated spell, because in this game it lasts all day long, and it makes many creatures have disadvantage to attack you, which is just a great defensive buff, given that it only costs a level 1 spell slot and lasts forever. That's pretty darn strong. Of course, if you have better things to concentrate on, you have better things to concentrate on, but for many characters, you don't, or you might as well cast it when you are between big spells, and just get that defensive bonus. It's especially important for Astarion right now, because he is trying to get his Strange Conduit Ring to be active, and so just having an all-day-long concentration spell is the best way to do that. Bloodless Elixir again, Sylvanas again, we talked about those. Astral Knowledge Dexterity. So Astral Knowledge is a Githyanki-only racial ability. It's pretty great, I would say. One of the best racial abilities in the game. You choose one attribute, Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma, and it gives you proficiency in all the skills for that attribute. Which for something like Intelligence is a lot of skills, and furthermore is a lot of skills that you don't actually want to invest in because they're all kind of individually bad. So it makes you think he's just great as skill monkey characters, or good as party face characters too, if you don't already have expertise in things like persuasion and whatnot. Now of course I already have a party face in Ballista, and I just don't care that much about the intelligence-based skills because they don't really matter in the game most of the time. But all the dexterity skills, like every single one of them is important and valuable, so it struck me as reasonable to give her dexterity skills. She has an Elixir of Cloud Gent Strength. Those are fairly rare in Act 1, at least at the beginning. You'll tend to get one toward the end if you do, some alchemy and you check the alchemy merchants like Dareth Boneclaw pretty regularly. And I think it's a little bit overrated, but it is very strong for Act 1. Getting a +8 strength modifier gives you tons of accuracy and tons of damage for any kind of throw or melee strength attack, and that's pretty darn strong. Later on in the game, there are more ways to boost your strength up to a certain number without taking up your valuable elixir slot, so it's not really that competitive with Bloodlust in the endgame, I would say, but it is, decent, and in the early game it's phenomenal. That one we talked about. Symbiotic Entity is a great perk that Spore Druids get. It's an alternative to Wild Shape, and it gives you a bunch of temporary hit points, and while you have them, you get plus a d6 damage on basically all attacks that you do. That's really, frankly, amazing. I think people kind of sleep on it. Almost any warrior build whatsoever should consider 2 levels in Spore Druid to get that free d6 damage on all your attacks all day long. What's not to love about that? It works better the less often you get hit, of course, so it's great in ranged characters, or if you have good tactics, but just, it's good all the time. Every warrior character who's doing a lot of attacks should consider 2 levels in Spore Druid to get that feature. Of course, in my party, Lae'zel is she's a druid, that's why she's got it. She's a Spore Druid. She's not really a warrior character. And that, I think, is it for the buffs on the main characters here. But my various summon critters also have Aid. Now, all my main characters also used to have it, but the thing about the spell Aid in this game is when you travel between certain regions, it gets purged off of the main characters, but not the summons for some reason. I think it's kind of a developer mistake or oversight. In any case, Aid is a great spell in this game, especially for fragile but important summon creatures like your familiars, which are hard to resummon because it can only be done once per short rest, or your skeletons, which can cost a high level spell slot to get this many of, and are quite powerful and have low HP. So, casting Aid, especially in a high level spell slot to give your summons many HP all day long, well worth it, I would say. Come to think of it, one buff that I don't have, and want to talk about why I don't have it, is Morning Lord's Radiance. You get that here in Rosenwood Monastery in this chamber when you put the 4 ceremonial weapons, or like any weapon of that type, onto the correct plinths. When that happens, then for the rest of that day until your long rest, all your party members get plus 1d4 damage on their weapon attacks. Which is really good, actually. In fact, it's so good I didn't want to waste it. The thing is, by the time you get it here, you're probably about to do the Githyanki Crash and whatnot, and then you'll be forced to long rest when you try to leave the mountain pass, because then you're forced to do the Voss cutscene. So I find that it's not really good to use it in Act 1, because you're about to only get to use it for like one zone and then it's gone. Whereas if you come back here after the start of Act 2, you can then get it applied at that point by putting the last ceremony weapon on the platform. And they can have it for like all of Act 2. We're not likely to get it for longer, but also, doing extra radiant damage is really good in a zone full of shadows and whatnot. So, for my strategy, I plan to come back here and get that at the beginning of Act 2, basically, and have it for hopefully all of Act 2. Well, with that, I hope I've not just answered the question that I received, but also given some good insight about what I think are the best ways to build a party to tackle the challenge of a no-rest run of Baldur's Gate 3. Even on normal runs, all-day-long buffs matter, but they're especially important on no-rest runs, where they're really one of the best tools in your arsenal to balance out the fact that you don't get to recharge your spell slots and things like that. It's really important to think about what buffs to get when and on which character. I think this is probably a good starting point for thinking about that for Act 1 at the very least. Each act of Baldur's Gate 3 has its own unique complement of powerful all-day-long buffs you can collect, and it's worth knowing where to get each of them, especially the secret ones like the ones in Act 2 I'll be getting pretty soon. Looking forward to that video in a couple of episodes here. Thank you for watching, everyone, and a special thank you to my Patreon supporters: MasterKnightDH, Jackie, Enlino, George Grin, Travis, Carlo Andrea 97, Cthulhu's Mom, Andrew Curzon, Truebsy, Skillwrap, Gregory, William Wakefield, Danny Hall, Jeffrey Morse, Just, Becca, Jack, Mashas01, Jacob Marshall, Nubiana, Till Fisher, Discord Colossus, Nicholas Schmuck, Kostya Nasarovich, Luke, Gomen Blackrock, Dodoking 4, Marcin Bialek, Maveth, TechnoWaffle, Nebular, I Loop, Michael Francis, Emperor Kong 420, Robin Maki, Micc Balls, Daniel Setteducato, Stiljn Flamee, Micah Marie, Christopher Olin, Stefan Van Zyl, Edie, Wendy, Ali Kasimoglu, Lucas Riverola, Skylar Sauce, Nick Myers, Bethany James, Emp Ninjas, and Prebin. Have a great day, everyone.